Welcome back to Star Narratives, the podcast. This is accessible and relatable astrology that teaches you how to support your emotional health using the wisdom of the zodiac. I'm your host, Natha Campanella. Hey, welcome to Leo season. I've been slightly MIA, so my apologies for that, but I'm back and it's Leo season, and I have a funny Leo season story for you, social media story. Before I tell you that, Leo is a fire sign. If you know somebody that has a lot of Leo in their chart, you'll know that they tend to be very flashy and they like attention. And oftentimes Leos are like the best dressed in the crowd, or they have something that makes them stand out. And that's because Leo is a sign that is about identity. It's about recognition. Ultimately, what we're looking for in our Leo placements is we want to feel seen. We want to feel recognized. We want to feel like we are valid, that we're living into our true potential of who we are, because Leo is such a sign of identity. Unlike the rising sign, which is also a sign of a placement of identity, the rising sign is how we greet the world and who we allow people to see when we first meet them. And the rising sign has a lot of like things that cover it up, right? Like we posture a lot with our rising sign because we understand that in order to get what we want when we're new to a situation, we sort of act a certain way. So we're sort of beholden to what we think we need to do when we're talking about our rising sign. Whereas Leo, which by the way is ruled by the sun and belongs in the 5th house, this is more of an archetype of just clear self. Who am I? Who am I when I'm not pretending? Who am I when other people's opinions don't matter? What really fills me up with joy? What makes me feel like I'm full of vitality? And how do I creatively self-express? So back to my social media story. I made a meme, or I made a poster, a diagram, a graphic, whatever you call it, about the 12 invitations of the moon, because I am launching an astrology course, by the way, and I'll tell you about this now. It's called Astrology 101 for the Intuitive Soul. And it's a basic fundamental astrology class, but in my signature style, I incorporate a lot of interpersonal exploration into learning about the 12 signs, which includes the house that they belong in and the planet that rules them. It's a really interesting class. It's a great way to learn astrology, but it's also this super portal into self-exploration. And so many of us are there right now. The world is going through this huge transformation. And while we can't necessarily create tons of change, tons of big change, on an outward level, we can do our little things, but the most powerful way to affect change really is to learn and to see ourselves, learn to see where we are doing all of the kind of crappy things that we see happening out in the world. When we see hatred, when we see racism and fear and anxiety and dishonesty and righteousness, when we see that out in the world, chances are, big chances are, that same stuff is happening internally. And while we can't necessarily snap our fingers and change laws or change the way that an entire culture relates to something, we can do that work personally. We can really get quite intimate with ourselves and notice, where do we get angry? Where do we get righteous? Where do we blame all of our problems on somebody else when instead of taking personal responsibility for them? And that's where the real work is for us right now as we're doing transformation. And that's part of why this astrology course is so timely And it is so perfect. Learning astrology, it's a superpower. It allows you to really be able to get clear guidance into what your history was like. And frankly, we all have blind spots. So even though we lived our history, even though we were there and we think we remember it all, knowing the astrology of it can really open up things that we haven't been able to see. But when you learn astrology, you can look at your own natal chart and see what was going on historically for you. You can get even some great answers into what was happening with your ancestors and how you have inherited that stuff, those lessons in this life. You can look at what's happening currently. And of course, there's a fair amount of future prediction that you can do. So it is a total superpower, but it is also an amazing way to just see yourself more clearly. So check that out. You can find that on my website. You can find that in my social media. I think that you're really going to love this class. So I created a graphic sort of as a way to tell people that I was having this class. And I forgot to put Leo on there, which is so unlike me because I really am, very Capricorn in nature. I like perfection. I double and triple check things. And I really detest making mistakes. And frankly, I just don't make them very often. Not to toot my own horn. Believe me, it's through quite a bit of self-torture that I make fewer mistakes than other people. Very loud inner critic. But I forgot to put Leo of all the signs on this graphic. And, Leo being a sign that wants to be seen, that wants to be recognized. It's like, of all of the signs to forget, that was the one. And I had plenty of Leos popping up in the comments section, like, where the hell is Leo? Hey, you forgot me. So I just thought that was kind of funny. And, I've gone out of my way since then to make sure to make up for it with many Leo posts. So, with Leo, wherever Leo falls in our chart, by the way, you can look at which planets are in the sign of Leo. You can also look at what is in your fifth house. And you can look at the sign of your sun and the relationships that your sun makes to the other planets. And these will all sort of paint you this picture around how this concept of identity shows up in your life, right? A lot of us have no idea who we are. I have a lot of clients that come to me that when I give them the intake and say, here are the questions for your reading, what would you like to look at? A lot of people are like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And that comes down to a question of identity. And our identity gets very piled on. The sun is a clean, clear version of who we are, but it also can get really muddled depending on what's happened in our life, depending on how we have had to perform and conform. Because a lot of times in our family of origin, we are not allowed to be who we are. We have to be who our parents want us to be, or, who our culture or our religion or whatever it is that is making this, holding up the standards, right? And so we devise these identities that are ego identities where, we say, this is my name. I was born in this country. I like this sports team. I only eat this kind of food. Whatever it is, all of these structures that we use to identify ourselves with. It can be very easy to kind of get trapped in those structures without going too much under the surface. But there's something that is very important about going under the surface through the course of your life, really dissecting, all of these ego structures and deciding, does this one still fit? Is this still true for me? Because it is through that kind of introspection that you begin to really see clearly, more clearly anyway, who you are. What is your driving creative force? And of course, you can look at the sign of your sun And that can tell you a lot about what your creative driving force is. You know, what you really need, what parts of you really need to be seen and validated and recognized in order for you to have a clear, clean sense of self. So, for example, I'll use myself as an example. My sun is in the sign of Taurus. It has taken me until quite recently to really understand how the Taurus archetype shows up for me. Now, mind you, I have Neptune in a very hard aspect to my sun. And if any of you have Neptune at all connected to your sun, it's going to be really difficult for you to figure out who you are, because Neptune makes things very confusing. So it doesn't surprise me actually that it's taken me until this long into my astrology career even, understanding Taurus. I get it. I can translate it really well for other people, but I was like, I don't really understand completely what this means for me. But lately I've been really understanding a lot more. One of the things about Taurus is that the worldview is really influenced by how comfortable something or someone makes you feel. And so if you have a lot of Taurus in your chart, but especially a Taurus sun, your identity is going to be very challenged when you're around somebody that disagrees with you, or when you are in a situation where you can't get that comfort. And so this was really enlightening for me. So I know that it's not that everybody has to agree with me all the time. It's just that I have to sometimes troubleshoot with myself. When I am bumping up against somebody that disagrees with me, I have to come in and be that inner witness that says, wait a second, this doesn't diminish anything about who you are or what you know or your validity as a person. This is just somebody that has a different opinion than you. And then I can calm down and relax. And it would be the same, for anybody. If you have a Libra sun, for example, then your reflection of value, your sense of self is going to be really connected it's going to be connected to being loved. So again, if you are in a situation where you don't feel loved, it's going to really destabilize your sense of self. And then, of course, you have the invitation to do that same kind of inner witness work where you really notice, okay, so this person it doesn't feel like this person loves me. And yet here I am. I'm still valid. I'm still worthy. I am not diminished by the fact that this person has their own thing going on. And that's really the lesson of Leo altogether, is that we start off wanting the reflection of the people around us. We want people to say, you're good, you're amazing, you're beautiful. Leo is dramatic entertainer. Leo wants to be adored and, wants flowers thrown up on the stage and a standing ovation. And that's all fine and good. It's just that we can't always get that from people. Sometimes people aren't going to like us. Sometimes they're going to think they're going to want to boo us. Sometimes they're just straight up ignoring us. They don't realize that we're there. And our job, really our mission, is to overcome that, to understand that our need to be recognized really comes from within. It's icing on the cake if somebody else realizes it too. But that's not the mission. The mission really is to see ourselves clearly. Understand what brings me pleasure. What makes me feel like I'm living a life on purpose, independent of what anybody else thinks. Because, we as humans have so much going on that doesn't feel good. That is also a huge part of the human experience. We don't just come here to have it all be amazing and sparkly and, we're like eating cupcakes and running through the waves. There's a fair amount of pain and suffering that we have to endure, but that's not necessarily Leo. The Leo sun archetype is like, hey, let's talk about what brings pleasure and how to really get to a place where we allow ourselves that pleasure. We know what we're looking for, and we can experience that sense of pleasure even when we are being disapproved of, or when we're being ignored, or when we feel invisible. So these are some good Leo thoughts. And my plan is to release some more podcast episodes. I'm definitely going to go through the rest of the signs. I began in Sagittarius last November, and we're at Leo now. So I will continue to come back every month to talk about the signs. And I may not be doing quite as many one-on-one interviews, but I do have some things up my sleeve for interesting astrological stuff that I think that you guys may really enjoy. So if you have something that you're like, ooh, cover this, talk about this, find me on Instagram at Natha Campanella Astrology and send me a DM. Let me know, because I'm definitely into, putting out content that you guys are interested in. All right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to work with me privately or read more about all of the numerous ways to work with me, visit my website, nathacampanella.com. I really appreciate any time that you take to leave a review of this podcast on any of the platforms that you listen on. It helps other people to find it. And of course, if you enjoy this podcast, share it widely and freely with those that you know and love. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.